Hey, it's Travis. Too many camp directors run just on gut feel. Our free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic is your dashboard for resilience. Take it today at camp.mba/Travis. Again, that's camp.mba/Travis.
Buckle up, Camp Pros, and get ready to launch into the future of summer camp with Camp Ahead. Camp Ahead helps Camp Pros think about the future so they're not caught off guard. Climate mitigation, heat, gender, war, demographics, economics, artificial intelligence. Are we ready as an industry? Camp Ahead, exploring the futurology of the summer camp industry. You can find our contact information and the many show notes from each episode at gocamp.pro/campahead.
Is creating your camp schedule a headache? Does it limit the experience of campers or staff? Campify is the software that does the heavy lifting for you, taking care of group, elective, and specialist scheduling based on your custom scheduling rules. Interested in learning more? Visit campify.io/campahead to schedule a demo or create a free trial today. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Camp Ahead. My name is Joe Richards, and I'm the Executive Director at Pierce Williams Summer Camp and Retreat Facility. I've been here for 20 years and been thinking about camp for almost just as long as that.
Hey there, I'm Jess Roberts. I'm the Executive Director of Episcopal Camps and Conference Centers, which is a network of over 100 Episcopal camp, conference centers, retreat centers, and farms across the entire world. And I've been doing and talking camp for 20 years plus.
Hi, everybody. My name is KJ Williams. I am the Chief Program Officer and Camp Director at Phantom Lake YMCA Camp in Mugwanago, Wisconsin. We are the oldest YMCA camp in the country, and I've been in the camp realm in some capacity for probably about the last 10 to 12 years.
Let's talk about Camp Futures, people. So if you're new to this podcast as a listener, you can listen to this. We're not going to say no, but there would be an episode before this. We're talking about the book. A lot of the ideas we're talking about come from the book Imaginable by Jane McGonigal. And the idea of the importance of thinking about the future so that it helps us be better prepared when things happen. That's as much of a recap as I'm going to do. Does that essentially give people a solid... KJ, how would you recap what we talked about if you can remember?
Yeah, I think we just had an intro of the ideas and concept of the book as a whole and really focusing on what we're going to talk about going forward and what going forward means for the camp industry.
Correct. I think we covered mental time travel.
Yes.
As a big thing, the idea that to put ourselves out there. And what else? My notes talked about mental time travel and how it applies to us. And then the basics of scenario planning. And today we're going to go into a few more of those things. So does one of you want to talk about what your concept of scenario planning is to give people a bit of a refresh?
I think that scenario planning is kind of taking a look at things that can happen and how we react to them in a very sort of basic piece. And I can sit here and go, in my life, I have two kids. So like if I'm scenario planning, I got to pick up both my kids today from school because my wife has to work and she's not coming home before she has another meeting later. So I know that I have to do things a little bit differently than a typical day today, right? So that's a basic today kind of plan. And then there are plans in life where you're looking at next week. Well, it looks pretty similar to this week. And then you're looking at, well, what about a year from now? What do things look like? And that's when things start to get a little interesting because you're getting outside of your routine, outside of the typical things, because lots of things can happen in a year. And we know that a lot of things will be changing, especially in the United States in the next year. And so we have to look at what are the possibilities of things that could happen.
Anything to add there, KJ?
No, I mean, I think Jess hit it right on the head, right? I think about almost like goal setting in a sense, right? Your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan, your next week plan. And in order to achieve those goals, like we're planning for the potential scenarios or the potential possibilities that will happen in that time.
And I think one of the big things for me is that we're thinking even farther down from 1 year or 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
So I know that you Americans are thinking about the next 4 years and how that relates to who you are, where you are. whatever side of whatever aisle people are on. The next 4 years are the next 4 years. I look at the scenario planning as this idea that when you're looking 10 years out, it's almost impossible to predict things to any certainty. And we're not trying to predict the future. We're just trying to imagine a future that we want or that might arrive. And then we walk people, the scenarios, and the community will walk people through those scenarios so that we can at least practice with our minds about how we might react if those things happened. And a lot of that is driven by the forces that are shaping this future. So identifying key drivers and uncertainty was the sort of title that this episode had in the planning document. So let's talk about some of the key drivers. So what are some possible things that will affect your camp 10 years from now?
I think the first one that jumps out, and this is probably on a lot of people's minds, is economic. And within that, I think of like cost of operations, rising labor costs, food, insurance, and we all know that insurance has made huge increases across the board when it comes to property insurance and energy. What is energy going to look like cost in the future? Other economic things I think about are like funding and grants. Will those be available? Will there be more? Will there be less? And then, yeah, I mean, so economic was a big jump off point for me as one of them.
Yeah, my first thought was just staff and everything that has to do with staff, right? Recruiting,
Yeah.
retention, mental health, pay, housing. I mean, and I think that's an issue that a lot of us are already focusing pretty heavily on. And if you're not, you should be. The staff world is changing drastically as the generations change, as the kids are changing, as the world is changing. So I think a lot about how we're going to continue to retain staff and take care of them.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
In 10 years from now, it's really hard to imagine. So what is a child born? So 10 years from now, so we're recording this on the Wednesday, the 20th of November, 2024. So 10 years from now is the 20th of November, 2034. So for me, staff need to be 16, which means that my staff would have been born in 2018. Like I could hire staff who are born in 2018, 10 years from now. And I don't even know what generation that is. Like what is that alpha?
Is that alpha? I think
I don't know. How old not that you need to share, but think about the age of your own kids, right? Like, and are they going to be camp staff in 10 years, right? Is the key. And how are we going to train them? And how are we going to even be able to keep up with the economics of what the money they will need to live, like our model of how camp works? I think a lot about the idea when I think key drivers, environmental comes a lot to mind because the next 10 years also play a huge role in our challenge with climate change and with changing things. Whether or not somebody believes in climate change, things are changing, right? Like, so it's getting hotter. You're going to have potentially in the next 10 years, you're going to have sections of the world where people can't live nearly as comfortably as they are. Even our own campers at our own camps might not be able to, like, think about a camp in Texas that has 110 degree heat now. Right. Let's say it only goes up by 2 degrees in 10 years on average for those hot months. That is still ridiculously warm. And how do we adjust for those things? Climate.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. KJ, what do you got?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going off of that same point too, Joe's right. Like we're already seeing the effects of these hurricanes that are coming through, these tornadoes that are coming through. Like that's going to be probably more common, right, as climate change advances and continues to go on. Yeah, and I'm really worried about what that's going to look like for some of these camps in Tornado Alley or Florida or the Carolinas. What is that going to look like, right?
Right, and then adding in states or places in the world, not just the United States, that don't have or haven't had bigger storms. And we sort of talked about that in our last episode about North Carolina, places that have never had a storm like that before. I think we're going to see that more in other places that aren't used to it.
Yeah, and I don't think, and that's the hard part about shifting climate and the earth just shifting around us, because what happens is we don't know how it's going to react. UCLA is doing a heat study, or was when I interviewed with them, and I was giving them perspective of heat on summer camp. But like when I see a storm or weather, I don't think that we can predict anything to any certainty if the entire Gulf Stream moves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if things are moving in the upper atmosphere, we have no idea how it's going to play in the lower atmosphere. And as a geography major, I am smart enough to know that I don't know anything, right? Like we should all be following building codes if your state or county or province has them, which I encourage states, county, and provinces to have building codes. But there's a reason that they talk about load and tornadoes and earthquake and all of those things. But they don't always know everything that's going to happen. And yeah. So environmental is one of mine that I think about.
The other one that popped up for me was technology. And I think that there's so many scenarios that you could even take from that, both positive and negative, for future planning as well.
Technology is a huge one. KJ, as someone who's grown up with technology, what are some of the things that...
Please speak for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, as a reference, I am firmly in the middle of Gen X, just so we're all on the same page here. And when I talk about someone who's grown up with technology, I'm not throwing KJ under the bus. What I'm saying
I'm also a millennial, so...
Yes, but you grew up only with technology, meaning that
I did.
As a Gen Xer, there was a whole time before technology, right? Like that I can serve if cellular service went out now, I would just be like, oh, this is like the 1980s.
For the record, as a geriatric millennial, I grew up without a cell phone. I remember when we got internet in our house, and I was in 8th grade. And so it's really interesting to go from my childhood pre-technology to having AOL Instant Messenger and getting my first email account. But it's interesting to be in that mix of having memories of not coming home till the sun went down to talking to people on chat or whatnot. I was just lovingly teasing though, so
it's fine. I think there are pros. I'm a cusp, right on the cusp of millennial, Gen Z. Definitely relate to both generations, which is, I think, a really big pro in this field and why I care so deeply about our staff, because I'm right there with them. But I mean, I think technology is, as it continues to advance, I think we have a responsibility to advance, even though we know we can do it without it, right? Like summer camp's been around way before technology was around, so we know we can run a camp without it. But the pros of having it, like the question is, do they outweigh the cons? I don't know the answer.
I was listening on a walk yesterday morning to Travis and Chris on the Camp Hacker podcast talk about artificial intelligence in summer camp. And I wanted to break into the conversation because I'd been a co-host on that podcast for so long. I was like, oh, you guys haven't thought about this aspect. I came in from that walk and I went to a whiteboard that's in our boardroom here that everybody walks through. And I just made a list of the things that we can do or that could be affected by artificial intelligence within camp. And it's a list of like, they were talking about how you could have AI create scenarios for you for your scenario walkthroughs with staff. And I was like, oh, you missed a component that what you should do is upload all of your incident reports to artificial intelligence. So everything that caused someone to write an incident report and then have it create the scenarios based on those incidents. Ooh, right?
Yes, love it.
That's huge because those are the big things. Those are the things that you're like, hey, we need to stop these things from happening. And it's a fascinating, and I think technology is one of those things that 10 years ago, so 2014, we were just moving into cloud-based things, right? Like technology wasn't good enough to have solely a Google Drive or solely this. People still stored a whole bunch of stuff on the computer, and APIs, application protocol interfaces, where we can talk, two programs can talk to each other, didn't exist 10 years ago in the same sense that they do now. Somebody might argue that they did exist. I'm not here to argue that. I'm just saying in the same sense that they do now, where I can have two programs talk to each other and pull data and correlate that data. There's also this idea of, so technology is a great one. There's the ideas of the social drivers as the world changes around us. So be that with national. So what are some social drivers? I think of a lack of, so social covers a whole bunch of stuff, just so we're all on the same page. Decrease in population, so demographics is social. Migration and immigration are social. The changing landscape of the LGBTQIA2+ is also part of this social framework, especially now that so many people are more comfortable talking about it and discussing it. What are some other social things that you two might think of?
I was just going to add to not only just the queer community, but also I think of equity and inclusion. So I'm thinking about BIPOC campers and leaders, raising them up and becoming, people talk about camp being this magical place where everybody's welcome. But if you look at statistics, what are we doing to actually, just saying you're welcome here and having the door open doesn't actually bring people in, right? And so and now I'm moving forward into like, what do you do when you pick the key driver, and how do you, but I think we can even push equity and inclusion even further when it comes to social.
I mean, my big thought was mental health. I mean, we already see this now, right? We already see it in a post-pandemic world. We saw it in a pre-pandemic world too, but it's advancing, I think, in the post-pandemic world, and it's becoming less stigmatized. So people are talking about it more. And I think that's only going to continue to increase as we move forward.
Do you think that, like, and that's the thing, this is where my mind goes to a future that we can't predict. Will obesity be obliterated in 10 years because of the new weight loss drugs, right? So will some discovery happen that would help lessen the burden of mental health on the people that suffer from it and society as a whole? What do we not, like, how will these things play out socially as we go forward?
Yeah, what new strain of COVID is going to happen?
What's the next pandemic?
What's the next pandemic? So I wanted to sort of recap just a little bit.
Yeah.
So we talked in the first episode of kind of like the basics, and today we kind of jumped in. But if we're talking about future scenario planning, the first thing you do is you look at the things. So key drivers, like you said, are these things that can shape your camp industry. So when you're thinking about what can shape your camp specifically, so that's when we started coming up with these ideas of like economic, environmental, social, technology. So what we're doing now is we're just spitballing ideas of things that came to our mind that could affect the future of our camps. And so from there, we made this list. And so if you at home are kind of listening, you could start thinking about this in the same way in your own, even if it's not a camp, in your own nonprofit or your own place. So just to kind of like see where we're going to be going with this, you've got your key drivers, and then we move into the next phase of it.
And I think it's important to note, like, we don't know the answers. We have no idea, right? And I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, I wish I knew the answers to all of these things, but we have no idea. And so I think another purpose and goal of this podcast and this conversation is to just have that conversation and bounce off of each other and work together, like the camp community is really good at doing, to do this scenario planning and come up with ideas or concepts even.
Yeah,
and
I love that. Yeah.
I think it's a really important point, KJ, the fact that, like, when you read, if I would recommend people to read the book or listen to the book, one of the things that is covered is this idea that we're not predicting a future, we're imagining a future. And then you can start to shape the future you want to come true. So your own camp can start to shape do things that help it get to a future that you see your camp at. Now, there are some, we threw out a whole bunch of stuff there at the beginning, right? Like, and there's other uncertainties, things like regulatory changes and behavioral shifts. And as we mentioned, technology disruptions. Like, these are things that are going to happen that we can't, there's no predicting. And I want to make sure people are really clear on this, that we're not predicting anything. We're just trying to help people understand that these things are possible and how to help their mind react as we go forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as camp people, we're really creative, and this is a process that I think like not only helps you use your creative mind, but also you start to think about things being possible. Not every future scenario is negative. And I think sometimes we jump to the negative, but what happens if the next day someone passes away and gives a gift to your camp of $500,000? How do you plan for that? What do you do with it? Because there's a lot of decisions that need to be made. And wouldn't it be great if you sort of had already thought basically about that? Even if it's a dream, you're like, oh, well, have time to dream. It's a great
huge
opportunity.
And I think that a lot of people have a dystopian view of the future, right? That it can go bad, but just as well, it can go good, right? This is the idea of pronoia versus paranoia, right? The idea that the universe is putting you in the exact right place that you're supposed to be at this moment and has given you all the resources to do what you're supposed to do. That is pronoia. And it's a fascinating way to live your life, because I didn't know that that's what I was doing, but that's what I've always done. It's sort of been like, well, I'm here and I might as well just like make the best of what I have. And Penn and Teller, if you're young, Penn and Teller are two magicians in Vegas. No, because I've asked my staff. You gave me a look.
I've seen Penn and Teller.
If you're not, what? Yeah, exactly. KJ has no idea who I'm talking about.
No idea.
So I have also seen Penn and Teller, and I was just watching a video with Penn on YouTube at lunch today. Anyway, Penn and Teller are world famous magicians who have a show in Vegas and have for like decades. But Teller on stage doesn't speak, but in real life he can certainly speak. But the quote, and I'm paraphrasing, is that for the most part, he has set his life up. He talks about a happiness horizon, right? Like where horizon is, and everything above that is happiness, and everything below that is sadness. And he's like, I've just set my horizon at the correct line where most of my life is happy. And I think for future scenario, when we're thinking and imagining things, and that's why the name of the book is Imaginable, right? When we're thinking that, what we're trying to do is to help us, because hey, let's get this straight. I'm not doing this for the people out there. I'm doing this for me. And I've gathered a couple of people, and we'll create a community around this to help me understand more, because we teach best what we need to learn most.
Right.
Is a phrasing that I've often heard. And I need to understand this. And I need to think about Pierce Williams in 10 years from now and how things, so the day I retire, right? Like, what's that look like if that's 10 years from now? Which is close, but yeah, it's fascinating. Summer camp directors, listen up. What if I told you there was a magical tool that could transform your camp scheduling chaos into a breeze? Introducing Campify, a camp scheduling platform making scheduling as fun as camp itself. Before you hit skip, hear us out. Campify isn't just another app, it's your new secret weapon to conquer scheduling chaos. Camps across North America wish they tried it sooner, and none would ever go back to scheduling the old-fashioned way. Every camp is unique, and it has its own special quirks. Campify gets that, and it works and thinks for you. It builds schedules based on rules that you set, and Campify offers much more than group scheduling. Campify's elective module gives campers personalized schedules. Say goodbye to last-minute changes causing scrambling and confusion. Campify's staff mobile app updates schedules in real time. Your time is valuable. Let Campify save you hours and make the scheduling effortless. Bring your camp into the future and discover the smarter way to schedule. Visit campify.io/campahead to schedule a demo. Create a free trial and claim 10% off your first year's license.
Is there a possibility to counteract all of these negative possibilities by throwing out some potential positive future scenarios that could also happen? That way we have those on our mind as well.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Woo!
Okay, great. Let's do some positive future scenario. It's not future scenarios, some possible key drivers that are positive.
Yes.
Unlimited energy that is free to use. There's a whole bunch of research being done on fusion technology right now, more so than any other time in human history, and it's looking positive. Unlimited free energy.
Mm.
You save all that money from your energy bills.
There's a lot of studies and research being done right now about the impact of camp in people's lives, like new ones. And I mean, we all know in the camp world how big of an positive impact camp can make on people's lives. But I think a lot of this information and information coming out about being outside is going to help drive camp in a different way than it has for this generation.
I have one of the best, probably willing to say, best grant writers in the game. She's so good at what she does on my team. And the amount of grants and funding that exist for the diversity, equity, inclusion world in camping are huge. There's so many of them. And so that's very promising for me.
I saw a keynote in Lake Tahoe at Zephyr Point while I was here for the Campfire Collective conference. And the keynote said, money isn't scarce.
Mm-hmm.
Vision is scarce. Money follows vision. And I was like, then I should not have an issue. This should all go just fine.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and I think with money, I think a potential future of philanthropic giving, the resurgence of that happening could be a huge gain.
Well, and I think the idea of, I saw an illustration this morning about what is the difference between a million, a billion, and a trillion. And I'm like, a billionaire could give me $1 million and not even notice it was missing, right? Like that's the reality. And I think that if something like Warren Buffett and the billionaires' commitment to give away their wealth, right? If we figure out how to tap into those and get that to the people who need it, I think that's another positive thing that could shape all of our futures. I don't want to gloss over, Jess, earlier you talked about like the value of outdoors. That research is long. So camp specific is probably 15 years in where we've had some really serious research done on it. There's much more being done now. Yep. But also the idea of the benefits of nature, which is something that has extended back into the 80s, right? That if you have a view from a hospital window that involves nature, you heal faster than if you have a view that doesn't involve nature. And this is one of the benefits I have is I live and work at camp. I'm looking out the window at nature as we speak, which is, I think we need more and more people to do that.
Yeah, I tell you how often my office is in the basement of my house. How often I leave my house to go work because, I mean, I live in Chicago, so there's actually a ton of nature, but I have to get creative. But just being outside makes a huge difference. There's some really great research about literally being in a forest and taking a deep breath and the bacteria that gets in your body that helps you. I mean, I know that research has been around, and I think we're getting even more done to show how important it is to be connecting to nature.
It's the idea of forest bathing, which is a Japanese practice that doctors, if you haven't heard of forest bathing, we are not naked when we do forest bathing. In your own private world, you could be, that's your own thing. But the essence of forest bathing is that putting people in the woods with no set expectation or time and just letting them wander is so beneficial, not just for their mental health, but for their physical health, that doctors in Japan actually prescribe it, right? Prescribe time in the woods. And I'm like, that's awesome. And reminds me why I should go walking in our woods more.
Oh, I love that. One of the other things I was thinking is a shift towards experiential learning. So I've noticed a lot more forestry schools and those kind of values of doing things sort of outside and like hands-on in nature. And they've been doing those around the world for years. And it'd be interesting to see if there's a gradual shift. What would that look like if all of the camps had some sort of forestry or outdoor school that was either intergenerational based or was partnered with a local school?
Are these positive enough for you, KJ?
Yeah, these are great. I'm just taking it all in. I think the biggest factor is community, right? I think that our generations, I think people in general, I think kids like are striving for community. I think in the post election world in the US, like people are striving for community, and camp does that, if probably the best, right? Out of many organizations.
And I think from a perspective of community, it's also that learning from people who and cultures that already get this, right? So we have started a journey to build a relationship with a local Indigenous group who is using our facility. And we've offered it at no cost to them because that's the least I can do. I don't know, right? Like, I'm like, great, it's in December. I'm not going to make money that week anyway. If I can start building this relationship and see where that goes. I think that positive thinking wise, I think that community is, and being in person with each other is so different than being on Zoom with each other, right? The three of us in a room together recording a podcast would be a very different thing than the three of us doing it from three different places across North America. So there is lots of positive. Anything else on that?
Sense of hope, everyone. I appreciate it.
I think too, like when you are doing future scenario planning for whatever it is, you should do a mix of both, and things that might have positive and might have challenging things that come up for you.
Well, and this is the key. Like when you look at environment, it's getting warmer for us, which is great, right? Maybe no snow. I might like no snow.
I love snow.
And I'm not saying I don't like snow, but it's this idea of how you go about looking at, and this is pronoia versus paranoia,
I hear you.
right? Like how you go about, but it is all the view of the glass. Is it half full or is the glass half empty? Those are the things. As we work through identifying key drivers and uncertainties, there's a lot. And once again, I think, KJ, you helped with this, right? That the uncertainty and the key drivers don't have to be negative. Those are just things that are going to shape a future that we want. So when we imagine 10 years out and when we get into developing scenarios in the next episode, we need to take all of these things into account, because what is the future you want to see for your own camp, right? What is 10 years out? Just talked about the idea of like, what if somebody gives you $1 million as a camp facility? And many years ago, there was a YMCA consultant named Gary Forrester who wrote an article in the camping magazine, and I read it every year for a number of years. I would just reread the same article. And essentially he said, most camps aren't ready for $1 million donation because what happens is they don't have a plan. And because they don't have a plan, they get an idea. And the idea is, let's build this building for $1 million. And then, this is really paraphrasing, but then they they get a building design, they do it, they realize, oh, we're going to go over budget, so it's going to be $1.1 million. So what we can fundraise for the $100,000 extra. And then they do, but the problem is they've put no money away for the upkeep of that building over its lifetime. And so this is the idea of scenario planning is like planning to get the $1 million donation, whether you know it's going to come or not, right? Like, so that when it happens, you have a much better sense of, oh, here are the steps we should take. We should put a quarter of this away and not touch it, so that that's the upkeep on a building. If we're building a building, the upkeep for the life of that building. If I'm going to build a $5 million eat, sleep, meet 50-person hotel style accommodation building, I'm going to want somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million extra to accommodate the next 20 or 30 years of the life of that building and the maintenance so that it never becomes a burden on the operational cost of the organization. And I think that's a great example of scenario planning. So we're planning a scenario as what if, right? What if you get a donation, or what if you decide to build this building, and how do you plan around it, and how's it going to affect your operations?
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And
It's a different way to think about it.
if you'd like to give that $1 million, my email is chess@episcopalccc.org.
Yeah. Well, and this is the key. The easiest way to research some of these things for your own camp, I would think the first thing I would do in today's world is I would put a bunch of these things for trend analysis and look at who your stakeholders are. And then I would ask some AI, be it ChatGPT or whatnot, to sort of help me with research for my local community and my local facility and what that might look like. But like, do you know who your major stakeholders are for your facilities?
Yes. I mean, I don't own facilities, but I know who the major stakeholders are of our organization.
And for an independent camp, KJ, how do you guys look at stakeholders in the future?
I'm going to be really honest, and I was going to bring up this point too, is that's above my pay grade. But however, with what we're talking about here, maybe it's not, and maybe it is something that I need to know more about. But I mean, I was also going to bring up the point of like, these conversations don't have to be executive director, CEO level conversations. Like, these conversations can be camp counselors, boots on the ground staff, frontline staff conversations. I think about responsibilities as a camp director, they're very different than my CEO's responsibilities, right? I'm doing drastically different work than this guy. And so my focus is this summer section and these programs. So what does my scenario planning look like for this, I wouldn't say smaller section because it's not smaller, but this other section of camp that isn't necessarily dealing with high level budget stakeholders, the board, those kind of things.
While you were talking, I was thinking, well, maybe KJ, even for you, part of it is like if you were making a future scenario where you do run the camp, what are the things that you would want to do to get to be able to to know what to do with $1 million gift, right? So it's like, oh, relationship building. How does that work?
Right.
Because you already, I'm sure, do this with parents and families and staff. And maybe if you have partnered with like local communities, so you've probably already done that. What does it look like when you do sort of that same thing, but on the next level up? Right? Because it's very similar in a sense, but a lot of it is knowing who are the major stakeholders,
right,
and how do I get introduced to them, or who connects me, and then what does that look like, right?
And how do you start those relationships now when you're in your position? Because 10 years from now, when you might be in a very different position, then you're ready for the strange questions or the big gifts or right. And the thing with scenario planning and with different levels, you can play once we've created something, we can play it with all levels because you're going to get different things back from different people, right? They're going to think about how it relates to them differently. If we had, I was thinking about it today, the sun, as I'm looking, the sun has come out finally. It was foggy here all day up until like 20 minutes ago. And I was thinking, oh, is this what a 10-year winter looks like? Which is a scenario that I've started to play through with Jane McGonigal and that. So the idea that you cloud over the earth to reduce the temperature, but it produces a 10-year winter where your low on any given day becomes the high, right? So if my low today was going to be, I'm going to talk in Celsius because I'm Canadian, but if my low today was 0 degrees, which to help everyone is freezing, so 32 for our people who haven't caught on to the easiness of Celsius. And if my low was that, and the low would be, let's say 10 degrees lower, right? So -10 for me, or 23 for you people, right? Like, in a 10-year winter, I was like, oh, is this what it would be like if we had no sun for 10 years? Like, would it just look like this? Like, would it be foggy? Would it be,
Mm.
would it be that same idea? And I think that you're going to get different things for whatever scenarios we decide to play out or to expand on.
Mm-hmm.
Every level of your camp, from camper to counselor to programmer to summer leadership team to permanent staff to executive directors to board members, I think you're going to get very different viewpoints about how those scenarios will affect their own camp.
Yeah. And sort of to kind of put some of this together. So today, like we came up with a huge list of key drivers, right? And those kind of spoked out into some other ones as well, because there are so many. And so on our next episode, we're going to be kind of developing scenarios based on those and kind of look through how do you create a range of scenarios. So like best case, worst case, and something super random. I call it a buffalo. I love buffalo, wild
Oh,
card,
okay.
whatever you want to
Okay.
call it. And then how do you build a narrative from there?
Yeah, interesting. I love the idea, and I don't want to. I love it. So when we're thinking about these things, we want to tilt. I would encourage everyone to tilt their own mind towards what your best case scenario is, right? How it affects your camp in the best case. You're also going to be thinking of worst case at the same time, right? Like that's just going to happen. And then what is the buffalo? What is the uncertainty that just doesn't, you can't predict or you
Mm-hmm.
can't imagine? And if somebody throws it at you, it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Any closing thoughts before we wrap up today's talk?
I think it would be
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it would be fun if we each picked a scenario to explore and it can be as serious as we want it to be, but just to kind of each of us take one and kind of spend some time on it each time and give an update of each one. Even though we'll be exploring a lot of other ones, I think that might be kind of interesting.
That's awesome. That's great.
I mean, that goes really along with what I was going to say too, Jess, is I think it's important that it was very intentional, this group that was chosen for this podcast, because we all do very different things in our camp worlds. And I think it's important that we hit all those factors of camps, right? Joe had just said, starting with your like CITs and your counselors and your unit directors, all the way up to your board members. And as a board member, you better be thinking about your CITs, right? And as a camp director, you better be thinking about your board members. And so I think as we go through this scenario planning, us doing this scenario planning and strategic thinking in the levels and positions where we're at, I think that'll meet or help meet the needs of other camp professionals at the levels that they're at.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I think that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think I love the idea of picking a scenario. So we all commit to this, picking a scenario for the next episode. And we can share these off in between this episode and the next one so that we're not picking the same thing. What I would highlight is that scenarios aren't specifically only about your camp. It's some larger thing and how it affects your camp and you as an individual. So a 10-year winter is a huge thing, but how does that affect camping? Your community not collecting garbage, that's a huge thing, but how does it affect your facility? Right. So when we think of a scenario, we're thinking of something up here and then how it plays out down here. Right. Because if we think too small, only a scenario to do with your own camp, then we're not getting that how it would be beneficial to other facilities as well. Yeah, I think that's super important. So pick a scenario to explore, big picture, and then we can talk about whether it works as a scenario or whether it doesn't, and how we see it going.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that'll be really fun. And I also think too, if you and you're listening to this are thinking, I'm getting stuck even coming up with a key driver, call some people who either, are your go-to storyboard people or springboard people and sit down and just chat. I find in my own life that like thinking out processes with like a big board or something like that sometimes is really helpful. Like even with the three of us just sitting here, we threw out more and more ideas. It's kind of fun. And then instead of just one small group of scenarios you could pull from, you've got such a wide bowl.
Yeah. I think next time I'll share, there's a tool that is a scenario planning artificial intelligence, or sorry, scenario generating artificial intelligence. So Imaginable created the group Urgent Optimist, which has now gone through some shifts. But Urgent Optimist, they created a AI that you can put in two things and it'll create a scenario for you to think about. I'll share some of those with you too before the next episode, so then we can
Cool.
talk about those as well to see if that piques our interest or whatnot.
Sounds
That's
good.
fun.
That sounds great. KJ, what is something you heard today that made you go, Is that our segment? Things that make you go,
What makes you go, I think it was more of just a reminder for me to not get stuck in the spiraling and get stuck in the negative key factors, and to know that there are positive key factors and key drivers that exist.
Awesome. Jess, anything that made you go, today?
Many things. I think I audibly made the sound. I have a very bad cold and my brain fog is going pretty strong right now, but I think that there is power in creativity when you are with other people.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm,
I think
yeah.
I think one of the things that made me go, is more of a reminder that just because I don't struggle with something doesn't mean there isn't a whole bunch of people who struggle or feel a certain way about things. So I don't always and I think this is benefit of a diverse group, is that I don't always think about mental health is not something that I blessed not to have to deal with personally. And from a family perspective, it's not something that has affected us, but understanding that that can be a major role in all of these things, and understanding, I think the one thing is this idea of looking towards the positive, right? What if utopia happens in 10 years, right? Like, what if we all get along? We all don't have to work. What would you do, right? Like, great. What if universal basic income became the law of the land, right? How does that affect summer camps, right? Like, these are the things where I'm like, oh yeah, just think positively about it. And I think it'll give us a much different perspective on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. That is episode 2, almost in the books. If people want to find out get information from me, you can reach me at joe@campisbetter.com, and you can find out all about Pierce Williams at campisbetter.com. Jess, where can they reach you or find out about the work you do?
And you can reach me at Jess@Episcopal, EPISCOPALCCC.org. I'm on the internets. I'm on the Instagrams.
Do you have any movies for viewing right now?
Oh yeah, I am a filmmaker. I work with a film collective called Urban Pebble, and you can watch those. I directed an award-winning short film called A Stable Holiday, which is a comedy that's not making fun of, but making light of holiday films, we'll just say. Like
Yes, it
Hallmarky.
is. I have watched it. Yes, it is.
Sweet.
KJ, where can
We're
people reach you?
Yeah, you can email me at kj@phantomlakeymca.org, and you can find us on all the socials. Phantom Lake YMCA Camp, phantomlakeymca.org is our website, and we're everywhere on the socials.
That's
and
awesome.
I did not recently make a film, but that is pretty sweet, and I will be watching it.
Well, that is awesome. Thanks everybody for listening, and until the next episode, stay safe.
All right, bye everybody.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to Camp Ahead, exploring the futurology of the summer camp industry. Don't forget to check out our contact information and show notes at gocamp.pro/campahead. Camp Ahead is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. Find a podcast for camp pros of every age and stage at gocamp.pro/podcast. Hey Camp Pros, we love that our industry is built on sharing. In order to foster that spirit, We ask that whenever you get something great from a conference session, one of these podcasts, from the Camp Pros group on Facebook, wherever else, that you give credit where credit is due. That way, people can feel comfortable about sharing their best practices and continue to make all of our camps better. Thanks so much.
Hey, it's Travis. Camp directors often tell me they're just too tired to take on anything new. That's exactly why my free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic exists. It doesn't add work, it shows you progress. Quick, free, repeatable, you'll know if your systems are paying off without the guesswork. Try it today at camp.mba/Travis. That's camp.mba/Travis.